Telling someone you're LGBTQ is scary, but this video series will help. Welcome everyone to Powered and Protected by Rainbows. I am of course your host, Matt Haslam. And before we jump into our episode, first off, don't forget to like this video, comment down below your LGBTQ friendly thoughts, and hit that rainbow subscribe button so you don't miss out on new episodes of Season 3. Anyway, on to our show. In this special series, we're going to be talking about the coming out process, and giving some advice on how to come out to your family or friends. But this is a very large topic to cover. So we're actually going to be splitting the topic into several different parts, so it is easily understood. If we tried fitting everything into one episode today, it would be rushed and not do the topic justice. So in the description of this episode is a link to the entire playlist, which might help you. And we encourage you to watch the entire series in full before coming out, so you know what to prepare for and how to best come out to your family and friends. For this series, we're actually working with several organizations, getting advice and interviews from experts. Before we wrote any of the scripts for this series, we had massive help from the Trevor Project, the Pennsylvania Equality Project, and many more amazing organizations. We've done all of this work to ensure it is the best possible info for you, because I know how scary it is to come out, and I know how hard it is to find accurate information while still trying to hide it from your family and friends. So let's begin our series discussing what sexuality and gender identity are, and that way you understand the terms we'll be using in future episodes of the series. A lot of times you might hear activists or experts using the term SOGI, spelled S-O-G-I, which is an acronym meaning sexual orientation and gender identity. We just abbreviate it because saying sexual orientation and gender identity over and over is a really long-winded way to say it. So what exactly is sexual orientation? Well, it includes different forms of attraction, behaviors, and identities. But in basic terms, it identifies who you are attracted to. When you're young, you might look at your parents, or look at character couples in your TV shows and movies, and think to yourself that sexual orientation looks like this. That a relationship is strictly between one man and one woman. In fact, depending on where you live, your school cannot legally teach you otherwise. But for more than 10% of the population, their sexual orientation looks more like this, where you can be in a relationship with a man or a woman or non-binary person. Or this, and you only want a relationship with another woman. Or this, where you're like me and only want a relationship with another man. But in school, or when you're young, they don't really teach you that in many cases sexual orientation can actually look more like this. And you might ask, why is this? Well, if you look at your parents, you might see a relationship where your mom and dad are attracted to each other in many ways. Emotionally, physically, sexually, mentally, sensually, aesthetically, and romantically. But that's not the way it works for everyone. Sexuality is a spectrum. So you can find yourself being attracted to someone in all of these 7 categories, or just some of these 7 categories, or none of them at all. For instance, you could be romantically attracted to men and emotionally attracted to women, or sexually attracted to non-binary and men, and have no romantic attraction to anyone. So while you might have been taught in school that there is only one sexual orientation of one man and one woman who are attracted to each other in all 7 categories, the truth is that there are endless combinations of sexualities. All 7 of these categories have a spectrum, which looks like this. And you can find yourself classified anywhere on any of those 7 spectrums at the same time. In fact, if you watched our previous episode on pride flags and what they all mean, there were dozens of flags to describe sexual orientations and gender identities. So there are literally endless combinations of sexual orientations and gender identities. That's important for you to hear at this moment, so you know that it's perfectly fine if you don't fit into one of the main checkboxes on the list of orientations or identities. There will always be a place for you here in the LGBTQ community. And as I said, just like there are endless sexual orientations, there are also endless gender identities. So what is gender identity? It describes our internal understanding and experience of our own gender. Each person's experience with their gender identity is unique and personal. Gender expression describes the way in which we present ourselves, which can include physical appearance, clothing, hairstyles, and behaviors. When you're born, you're taught that you're either a boy or a girl. This is called your sex assigned at birth. When you're born, doctors decide whether female or male will be listed on your birth certificate, and oftentimes this is based solely on your genitals. For instance, I have a penis, so I was assigned male at birth. As I grew up, I always felt the male gender identity described my internal understanding and experience of my own gender. And I always expressed my gender through male physical appearance, clothing, hairstyles, and behaviors. And when we're talking about gender identity, you might hear the term cisgender fairly often, which is when someone's gender identity and expression align with their sex assigned at birth. Therefore, I am technically considered a cisgender male. And while many people were taught that gender identity looks like this, the truth is that gender identity looks more like this. And you can identify anywhere on this chart if your experience with your internal understanding and experience of your own gender differs from the sex you were assigned at birth. Being transgender is when your gender identity differs from the sex you were assigned at birth. Many transgender people will transition to align their gender expression with their gender identity. However, you do not have to transition in order to be transgender. Another gender identity is called non-binary, and this is for people who experience their gender identity and their gender expression as outside the male and female gender binary. Many different categories are used for non-binary, such as gender fluid, gender queer, polygender, bigender, demigender, and agender. But when it comes to gender, the most common way to communicate your gender to others is by the pronouns you want others to address you by. For example, since I am a cisgender male, I ask people to address me as he, him, his, and himself. But how you want others to address you is your decision, and only your decision. For clarification on this, here is a list of pronoun combinations you might want others to address you as, and these typically match your gender identity and expression. Studies show that when non-binary or transgender individuals are addressed by their proper pronouns, which they chose for themselves, it decreases suicidal thoughts by 29%, and suicidal behavior by 56%. And if you identify as non-binary, please know that you're not the only one. In fact, 25% of LGBTQ youth identify as outside the gender binary. But one of the most common misconceptions you might hear others have is grouping us all together. For example, when people hear the acronym LGBTQ, because we don't have proper LGBTQ education in our schools yet, some people grow up thinking or assuming that lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, questioning, and non-binary are all the same, but they are not. For example, I am a cisgender male and I am also gay. I identify my sexual orientation by one of those letters in that LGBTQ acronym, the G standing for gay, but I don't identify as transgender or non-binary. If you are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or pansexual, it does not mean you are transgender or non-binary. Just like if you're transgender or non-binary, it does not mean you're gay, bisexual, or pansexual. Though we celebrate pride events together and we are part of a large community together, one does not automatically mean the other. With that said, you could be both transgender or non-binary and also gay, bisexual, or pansexual. And I realize there are genders and sexual orientations I'm not listing here, but there are simply too many to name in a short episode. So to make things simpler to describe, I am listing these orientations and identities merely as main examples. Another example I want to highlight is a friend of mine, who you'll actually meet later in this series. He is a trans male, meaning although he was female sex assigned at birth, his gender identity and expression are male. He is engaged to a cisgender female, so technically speaking, his sexual orientation is defined as straight and heterosexual. The final term you should know before we continue in this series is called Deadname. The term only applies to transgender and non-binary individuals, and it refers to the name they were assigned at birth. For example, if you were born by the name of Stephen, and your gender identity and expression does not match the male binary, A part of the transitioning process to being transgender or non-binary would be to change your name legally to something more feminine or outside the gender binary. If you were assigned the name at birth of Alex, which is a unisex name, you could choose to keep that name if you wanted. But no matter the case, if you change your name to something to match your gender identity and expression, the name you were assigned at birth, which you no longer use, becomes your dead name. This name is no longer used and is dead to you. And for this reason, it is imperative that those around you address you by your chosen name and your chosen pronouns. In part 2 of our Coming Out Advice series, we will discuss tips and advice on how to test the waters and how to come out safely as your sexual orientation and/or your gender identity. As for now, that's all for our episode today. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this episode and want to support more content like this, please consider pledging to our Patreon page, where you can get a ton of benefits. Just go to patreon.com/MHPTV or click the link in the description. Don't forget to like this video, share your LGBTQ friendly thoughts in the comments down below, hit that rainbow subscribe button so you don't miss out on new episodes of our show, and share this video with others. I'm your host, Matt Haslam. This has been PBR. Have a gay day, everyone, and bye for now. Watch Powered by Rainbows Season 3, only on MHPTV.